Wow, that was awesome. I just so grateful for the ways that the Spirit moves, and just so awesome for the many different gifts that come and bring and allow and become vehicles for the Spirit. Our help comes from so many different places. Our power comes as we're rooted. In this image this morning, we are like trees rooted by the water. And because we're rooted in the rich soil, because our roots go deep, our leaves are green and verdant, and the fruits come in their season. This image speaks about the richness, the health, the fruit of our life. We're starting a new series, which is very appropriate for May, because May is just May. It's May. It may not feel like May, but it's May. May is just an awesome month. I love May. We're looking at living wholehearted lives. Wholehearted. You know, do you get tired of living half-heartedly? Do you get tired of those situations where you just feel kind of half there and half-hearted? Isn't it awesome to live full-hearted lives, wholehearted lives? We're going to bring the Psalms, which are just, they speak of rich banquets, and the Psalms just bring all the emotions. They're in one psalm, like Psalm 22, for example. You can go from the depths of despair, where the psalmist is talking about, I am a worm, I am nothing, I feel discarded, my enemies circle around me, and then by the middle of the psalm, but it is you, O God, who brought me forth in my mother's womb, and it is you who restores me. And by the end, the psalmist is praising just the range of full human emotions, wholehearted living. And we're going to start this morning with authenticity. What does it mean to let go of the voices in your head? What does it mean? How can we let go of who people say we should be, what we have imagined that people are thinking that we should be? How can we let go of that in order to completely and fully embrace who we actually are? I've been reading through a book called The Gifts of Imperfection by a psychologist named Brene Brown that many of us are familiar with. The gifts of imperfection. We don't have to be perfect, and we surely don't have to live up to other people's expectations, because we have been created uniquely and powerfully to live and to be exactly who God has called us to be, and to bear the fruit that God has called us to bear. I am an apple tree. I am an apple tree. And I bear apples. And I like mangoes better. Mangoes are so sweet and smooth, man. Once you have a mango, it's really hard to go back to an apple. And I wish I was a mango tree, but I'm not a mango tree. Mangoes don't grow in New York. I'm an apple tree. So let me bear apples. Let me come forth with the fruit that I have been created to bring forth, and not worry about whether my fruit looks like somebody else's fruit, whether what I'm doing or how I'm being or how I'm speaking or how I'm dressing or the art I bring or the music I bring. Why do I have to worry if it's like somebody else's? Why can't I be fully, uniquely who God is calling me to be? So this morning, in moving toward authenticity, we're going to talk about 3 different moves. The first move toward authenticity is, what am I hiding? And why am I hiding it? Why do I feel like this part of myself, which I know is an authentic part of my true self, why do I have to hide that from people? And then second of all, as the scriptures speak so powerfully, connecting with God, connecting with love, rooted like a tree by the water, bearing fruit. And that's the third one then, the fruit, producing the fruit. So we're going to look this morning at hiding, at connecting, and then at bearing fruit. So if we think about the hiding part, and this is maybe a hard part, but I think most of us are aware of it. We're mostly aware of the things that we're hiding. There's something about you that you know in your heart is you. You know in your heart that this is what you're about. It's something, maybe a unique perspective you have or a way you go about things, but somehow you feel like you need to hide it. And oftentimes this has started when we were young. It got us at a vulnerable time in our lives, when we were just forming. And somehow it got rooted in us that certain parts of ourselves are not okay. In my experience, I got it in my head very early on that basketball was my ticket. That was the way I was going to go where I wanted to go. First of all, because I loved basketball. In the town I grew up in, football was the real ticket. That was the real deal. But I wasn't football. It wasn't me. I couldn't, basketball was my thing. And basketball was a pretty good sideshow. It was pretty good. You could go far with basketball. So I was dreaming of being on the varsity high school basketball team. I was dreaming of wearing one of those cool black jackets with the yellow letter on it for our school. I was dreaming of all the perks that would come with that because, being on the team would then give you access to various parties and social settings and, the places you could go with basketball. And so I poured my heart out. I mean, from the time I was 5, I was out there all the time. And I'm good, aren't I, Joel? I'm good, aren't I? Huh? Come on, admit it. Now, the problem was that my growing didn't keep up with my ambition. In 6th grade, I was the tallest kid on the team. In 9th grade, I was the shortest kid on the team. I was the same size in 9th grade as I was in 6th grade. Something didn't kick in for me like it did for the other kids. All the kids their voices were dropping and they were getting big and, walking around. And I was still walking around. I was still the little one. I was still in 6th grade. And it wasn't, it was frustrating. But by 10th grade, I was cut from the team. 11th grade, I was cut from the team. 12th grade. My high school biology teacher, I had an A in biology. My high school coach was my biology teacher. He didn't even call my name in practice. Wouldn't even call me by name in practice. And I felt humiliated. I felt like all the channels of success were being closed off to me. I was frustrated, alienated. But I got an opportunity to be a basketball coach at a 6th grade team at Gladstone Elementary School on the other side of town. And this was a transforming experience for me. Whereas Mr. Hamilton didn't call me by name, Mr. Miller, who was the custodian at Gladstone Elementary and the basketball coach, not only called me by name, but he mentored me. He let me make my mistakes, but he was around and he watched what was going on, and it was a transforming experience for me. Now, when I brought that experience back to my high school, I got nothing but flack for it. I got nothing but scoffing. This word in the Psalms, scoffing. It's not even criticism. There's not even the respect of a formed criticism. It's just dismissal. It's just, psst. What's that? It's on the other side of town. Who are those people? I got remarks that I would care not even to mention here about that. So I began to hide it. I didn't talk about it. Even though I knew it was something that was important to me, that was transforming to me, in many ways was one of the most important things that was happening to me at that time. And yet in that setting, I didn't feel like I could talk about it because I wasn't getting any appreciation or any understanding for what that was. Now, you've had that experience too. What has it been for you? What was it maybe at that tender age, at that early part of your formation, where you were beginning to sense that you were, maybe a little different than somebody else. Maybe you saw things differently. Maybe you went at things a little differently. But it wasn't acceptable. And you knew it wasn't acceptable. People didn't have to even come right out and say it. They could just be a little glance of an eye or a little something or other. And you knew deep down that that wasn't going to be accepted. So we began to hide it. But there was a turning point for me. At the end of the season, Mr. Miller had a banquet, and he invited all the kids, and he invited me, and my brother was coaching with me. And he gave my brother and I jackets, red jackets that said Gladstone on the back and Coach on the front. And man, when I first got that jacket, I loved that jacket more than a leather jacket with the A on it. The moment I got that jacket, I wore that thing, and it was like I was able to put on who I was. I was able to wear who I was. And it just transforms us. What is it that you're hiding, and how can you begin to wear it? How can you begin to embody that which God has created you to be? So the psalmist gives us some really powerful teaching here. Happy are those. Happy, blessed. The Hebrew word blessed, the depth of blessing, the depth of fullness, wholehearted living. Happy, wholehearted are those who do not follow the advice of the wicked, or take the path that sinners tread, or sit in the seat of scoffers, but their delight is in the law of the Lord. I want to look particularly at the path of sinners and the seat of scoffers. Because we really need to get in and understand that there's been so much distortion of what this is about. A lot of times we think that sin, and the church has told us, and we've been told all our lives, this is part of that voice that's out there saying that sin are these little things that we do that don't conform with the way we're supposed to be. But it's almost the opposite. The psalmist is telling us what sin is really about. It's not the deviation, it's not the marginalization, it's the path itself. It's the established societal path that is the problem. It's the privileging of this over that. It's the saying that God created me this way, so everybody has to be this way, or else it's not okay. It's the privileging of, in our society, that which is white, that which is male, that which is straight, that which is all the kind of dominant privileges. That's what the sin is. And the marginalization of that is the opportunity to be fully who we are. The path of sinners, the seat of scoffers. These are established orders. This is not people just wandering around scoffing. No, this is an established seat. Those who have the seat at the table of power are scoffers, because it is a table of scoffers. This is how our society operates, on scoffing. If you go to a legislator, a member of Congress, I have had this experience many times, they will not tell you that the justice proposal that you're bringing is wrong. They will not tell you, as a matter of fact, they will agree that this justice proposal needs to be put in place. Yes, black lives do matter. Yes, all people should have equal housing. Yes, they will agree with that. But the particular proposal that you're bringing, and it won't even be a point-by-point criticism, it will just be scoffing. It's not realistic. It could never happen. It's a great idea, but it'll never happen. You're just being unrealistic. This is just not the way things work. Of course, all of us wish things could be that way, but it's just not the way they work. This past week, I had the opportunity to visit with one of the members of the city council, Councilman Cabrera, who operates in a district just south of here. And we were talking specifically about some changes that are slated for our neighborhood. See, the powers that be are beginning to circle, and they have designs on the Bronx. And the changes that are coming are comprehensive and frightening. And we don't see it yet, but it's already in the offering. From Jerome Avenue, from 167th all the way up to 184th, a massive stretch of Jerome Avenue is slated to be rezoned and transformed. And I was talking with Sandra the other day, who's the director of the Northwest Bronx Coalition, and she was helping me to see actually what's happening in a kind of a comprehensive analytical way. Displacement is what's happening. Displacement is what's on the chopping block. Displacement. Comprehensive across the board displacement. First of all, the displacement of residents. People who live in apartments now are not going to be able to afford to live into apartments soon. Because when this new stretch goes up and the rezoning goes up, the supposed affordable housing is only slated to go down to what, 50,000, something like that, an income of 50, 60,000, where the average resident at this point is 20, 25, 30,000. That's where people are residing. So, and the stretch that comes up Jerome is then going to affect the area for miles around, so that landlords are already beginning to look at ways that they can raise the rent. So there's a displacement of residents. There's a displacement of businesses already. Businesses are having a harder time paying their rent. A displacement of basic services. The North Central Hospital now is on the chopping block. Once again, the displacement of students from the schools through these new policies where you can get suspended for so much as smirking or having your hat on backwards. You know, the kind of defying of authority, the vague areas in which students, so the displacement of people at all different levels of society. So I went in with this group that I hadn't really spent a lot of time with, but they had very concrete proposals, very specific, detailed proposals about how this plan could go into effect, but how it could be made affordable for the residents that actually live there so that the displacement is not happening. Yeah, sure, we'd all like to see the neighborhood better. We'd all like to see improvements in the neighborhood. But how can those improvements be made in a way in which the 20,000 folks, the 30,000 folks, the 40,000 folks, the 50,000, that everybody has a place where they can continue to live, that we improve together in our diversity, in all of who we are, that we don't have to hide. See, this whole thing, what God is calling us to is not fitting in, not having to hide certain parts of ourselves so that we can fit in. What God is inviting us to is belonging, so that we can come with all of who we are. All of the people in our community can come. We can grow together. We can prosper together like trees that are planted by the water. So the psalmist is telling us, beware of scoffers. That's what happened at the meeting. Councilmember Cabrera was listening. He was attentive. He agreed with what we were talking about. He also wants to see things go well. He also cares about all the residents of the community. But then the scoffing set in. But it just can't happen. The developers will never go for it. If we try to present that plan, you know the developers will never go for it. The developers will never go for it. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Scoffing becomes its own self-fulfilling prophecy. As long as the powers that be keep saying we can't do it, we can't do it, we can't do it, eventually we can't do it. What if we say we can do it, we can do it, we can't do it until we do it? That's a different way to go about things. That's the thing that the psalmist is inviting us to. Don't get all caught up treading that path that sinners walk and sitting in the seat of scoffers. Scoffers are just trying to stop the growth of the healthy tree that God is planting by the stream. Instead, delight in the law of the Lord. Delight in the way of God. What is the law of God? The law of God, Jesus put it very succinctly, very clearly, is to love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Love, a connection with love. That's what we're called to. Blessed are, happy are, wholehearted living are those who connect fully with the way of God, the way of love. Loving God with our whole minds, heart, soul, and strength. Loving our neighbor as ourselves. Loving all of ourselves. There's nothing we need to hide. Why are you going to hide something that was created by God? That was formed together in your mother's womb. You were created in the power and beauty and image of God to shine. Not to hide, to shine that light that God has created in you. So that's the advice of the psalmist. Enter into that law of love. Meditate on it day and night. Let the scoffer scoff, but don't listen to him. Allow the delight of the Lord, the power of the vision, the fullness of what God is calling us to move and course through you like the water courses through the roots of a tree that's planted by the water so that the leaves grow green and shimmer in the light and the fruit comes in its season. We're bearing fruit. And we're bearing exactly the fruit of the tree that we are planted to be. You know, there's a great story of a kid that whenever he got punished, he would get sent to his room. But there was this really nice tree right outside his window. And so he could get out on the branch and escape and go out and play. And then one day his dad said, you know what, I'm going to cut that old tree down. It's not bearing fruit anymore. It's been years since that tree's borne any fruit. I'm going to cut that thing down. So the kid was horrified. His escape route was going to be knocked down. So he went out and he bought bushels and bushels and bushels of apples. And one night, him and his buddy got up in that tree and they tied apples to that tree, all up and down the branches of that tree. And the next day, his dad came out, my goodness, I haven't seen that tree bear fruit in years. Look at all those apples on it. That's amazing, amazing, especially since it's a pear tree. Because pear trees don't give apples. And coconut trees don't give mangoes. You know, maybe you think mangoes are better, but if you're an apple tree, make apples. You know, how many times have you looked at somebody else, your competitor, you think, in your mind? You have imagined that so-and-so is your rival somehow. And you just look at their fruit. Boy, I wish I could make that kind of fruit that they're making. I wish I was doing what I wish I spoke the way they spoke. I wish I did things the way they did them. But that's not the kind of tree you are. There's plenty of pear trees. Be an apple tree. You know, just allow yourself to bear the fruit that God is calling you to bear. Yesterday, one of the most important kind of mentors in the life of myself and Luke, and maybe some others here in this room, Daniel Berrigan, passed away at the age of 94. I don't know how many people for whom he was a formative person, but he was incredibly formative for me. My first year in seminary, I had a course with Father Berrigan. He's a Catholic priest, a Jesuit. He was first known, I think, in probably 67, 68 for burning draft records in Catonsville, Maryland during the Vietnam War. But he and his brother and others were uncompromising in the way they understood their calling as Christians. Uncompromising. They were unwilling to be cowed by the voices of scoffers. They would not allow the scoffing or any of that keep them from the fullness of what they were called to do. They were peacemakers, and they were going to make peace even if the whole world was a war-making world. And they were going to do it boldly. And so I first encountered Father Berrigan in a class he taught on the book of Revelation in my first year of seminary. And he completely opened up the Bible to me in ways that I'd never heard it before. He put it in its social context. He said Revelation is not, the beast and all this kind of imagery in Revelation that people have turned into all these kind of bizarre things. It was very concrete. It was about the Roman Empire. This is the Christians under the Roman Empire. This is John writing the Revelation from prison where he's being tortured under the Roman Empire. The beast is the empire. He unpacked all that for us, and before I knew it, I was committing civil disobedience. I had never considered such a thing before. I had never even been to a demonstration. But before that class was over, I was committing civil disobedience. He was my partner. And I'd never done this. I'd never prayed so hard in my life on what am I doing? How is this happening to me? And so then we're at a meeting, and we're talking about what comes next. So we're going to have a trial. We all have to go for this trial. And, they'll probably give us community service, and we're kind of trotting all this stuff out. And Berrigan's sitting over there just kind of not really paying much attention. Then all of a sudden he says, I don't think we should go to the trial. I think we should put them on trial. It's just, there's never a willingness to play the game. They're the ones making war. We're going to put them on trial. We're not the ones on trial. We're trying to make peace. So instead of going to the court hearing, we're going to have our own trial over here. And I'm going, oh, Lord Jesus, I am way over my head. But that's the way he lived his life. He lived his life as a peacemaker. He and his group, they formed a group called the Plowshares, 7 or 8, and they would go break into, nuclear weapons was their big target. This was big in the middle of the arms race where we were, spending billions on these weapons to destroy the world. And he and his friends would go in and they would break into a top security federal facility and start hitting on nuclear weapons with little hammers and pour their blood on it. And it's so audacious and so ridiculous and so amazingly transforming that there is nothing that's going to stop us. The empire does not rule. We are part of God's reign. We are not subject to the scoffing of the empire. We do not have to live our lives according to the scoffing of the empire. We do not have to constantly be walking around wondering if we're displeasing someone, or if we're stepping out of line, or if things are a little bit out of track. If God has called you to hit weapons with hammers, then go on and hit them. And then, he bore the consequences. But he died, a couple miles from here, right? He lived out his last few days just right here. He was part of the Jesuit community around Fordham. And he's just somebody that speaks to this moment to me. To be your authentic self. Whatever it is you're called to do, don't let anybody tell you that you're not supposed to do it. Because God is the one that created you to do it. Who's going to tell God not to have you do what God created you to do? So as we meditate day and night, we become like trees planted by the water. And that water moves in our roots and it keeps our leaves green. Whatever kind of tree we are, our leaves are beautiful. And the fruit that we're bearing is the exact fruit that was meant to come off those branches. And it is providing nutritionally and it is delicious and it is exactly what we're called to be. So that's our invitation this morning, to be your authentic self, to be all of who God is calling you to be. Gracious God, we, each of us, thank you for making us just like you did. We're not questioning your judgment. We're not wishing you made us different. We're instead appreciating the way you made us. You are indeed a master craftsperson. The little nuances that you made in us. God, when we really scrape away all the scoffing, bottom line is we really do like ourselves, just like we are. We appreciate who we are. We'd be our own best friend. And we're going to start being our own best friend. In Jesus' name, amen.